Hello everyone. So last time we successfully created our first database. We were also able to obviously install the SQL server, in this case SQL Express, and now it's time to learn a bit about the SQL itself. So today we're going to focus ourselves to the DML or data manipulation language. Essentially, this is the set of commands which are being used to deal with a data manipulation. To be precise, we're going to work with select statement, update, delete, and insert statements. So all of those statements are being used for a specific purpose, and select essentially is being used to extract the data from a database. Update, we will obviously update the data in the database. Then we have a delete, which will delete the data from the database, and insert into, guess what, we will insert the data inside the database. So let's go and build our first query. So how do we make a query? So we can obviously click here on a new query, or we can do the right click on a database and select a new query. Be aware that you should use the database that you essentially want to work with. And if you want to be 100% sure, you can just specify here, say use employees as a database. So this time, everything that runs inside the scripts are going to use the employees database as a primary, as a target database, not a primary one. So we said already we want to work with a select. So we want to read the data first. And how do we do this? So I'm just going to hit the enter a couple of times to make a bit of a space here. And I'm just going to write select, and then I'm going to put a star, and I'm going to say from, and then user. So let me just explain this query a bit. So select obviously is going to tell to our engine to read the data from a database, and then star means all columns. So if we just expand the user, we see that it has a couple of columns, so we don't want to specify each one of them in this particular case, but I'm actually saying, okay, select all of them. And I'm telling him select all columns from table user in the employees database. So if I just mark this, and if I hit F5, or if I hit the execute button here, I will get my data set, essentially the results. So if you just look at it, we see that we have a total of 12 records that have been created and that exist in this table. So how can we specify certain things a bit better? So if we are just interested, let's say, in the first name, last name, and date of birth, what we should do, instead of just having a star here, we can just say first name, last name, and date of birth. So something like this. And if we select this, we will get only those 3 columns in our data set. So usually, it's highly suggested that you just use the columns that you need in your query, because obviously the execution of the query is going to be a bit faster than when you specify all columns and all rows. What else can we do? So we can choose how many rows do we want to return. So in the case that we have here millions and millions of records, probably we don't want to, in every single query, to retrieve millions of rows. So how can we specify how many rows do we want? We can say select top 10 rows, and if I choose this, I'm going to get only 10 rows. Be aware that all of the rows are now being sorted by primary key in this case, so ID. And let's say if I want to sort them out as well, I can use something which is called order by. And then I can specify by which column do I want to sort this sample. And let's say I want to do it by last name. And if I do this, I will get sorted sample. I can also sort sample in 2 different directions. So it is going to be ascending directions, so which is essentially the case right now. So the first letters are starting at the beginning, so B, C, D, etc., etc. And I can also go in a descending order. So in this case, we're going to have Tampen at the beginning, Winston at the beginning, and it's top 10. So Winston was not showing in those previous data set. So I'm getting here essentially records sorted in a given order. What else can I do? Well, I can filter the data, right? So I can also filter the data by saying where, and then I specify certain criteria. For instance, if I say their date of birth is larger than this, for instance, then I will get only the records which have a date of birth larger than this number. So here I have just 8 rows in this data set. Perfect. What else can I do? I can specify additional parameters here, and I can say and let's say what should I say additionally? Let's say last login is not null. So let me just try this one, and now I have just 4 records. So maybe just explain you quickly why have I wrote this in this way. So nullable values, and when you work with null, this is a specific it doesn't have actually any value, so you cannot write anything like this. So last login is null, but because it will not work properly, you have to work with something like is not null or is null. So in this case, you will get correct execution of your query. For other types, you can use the let's say instead of this one, let's say first name equals to Mike, right? And then you will get only the persons that are born on the date which is larger than specified, and then with the first name Mike, and the data set is going to be ordered by the last name. So this is essentially what you have with the select. We'll go back to the select afterwards. I'm just going to explain you a couple of more examples which you can use. But for now, let's say that this covers the majority of the select statements. Then what we can do, we can also write insert statements. So if I go ahead here and say insert into, and then I will specify user table, and then I can specify which columns do I want to fill in with the data. So obviously I have to insert the data for all the columns that have not null set, the constraint set to not null. So obviously it's quite visible here which items are not null. But we also, if we just go on a designer quickly, we will see here that we have also some columns with the default data. So this default data is going to automatically generate the data for the specific column if this is not explicitly specified inside the SQL here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ignore the default values. I'm not going to write them, so I'm going to leave it to SQL to generate those values, and I'm going to quickly create a new record for the user. And I'm going to say that I'm going to specify first name, last name, date of birth, account type ID, email, phone number I will not because it's null, primary language ID, and is active, I don't care, and created on, I believe that the created on is also, it has a default value here, which is a get date. Okay, so let me just close this, and now I can specify values. And now values are being written in the order where the columns are being specified in the insert into statement. So for the first name, what I want to do, I want to create one more Mike Winston. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to, for the last name, I'm just going to choose Winston. And for the date of birth, I'm going to choose the date of birth. Account type ID, well, I have absolutely no idea what is the account type ID, so I'm just going to read this one. Email I will not use, but I'm also interested in a primary language. So I'm just going to choose this one. So be aware of one cool thing. So this query here is being completely ignored because I selected this one. So only this only this one is being executed. So you can execute it in a different directions. You can do right click, execute F5 here, however you want. You can just execute a query quite fast. So I did the date of birth. Now I want to do the account type. So let me just put the account type here, and email, let's say test@test.com, something like this. Primary language ID, let's say I'm going to use also this one. I have absolutely no idea what is this. And then I'm just going to say that he is active. If I want to have additional rows, I can create multiple of them. Let's say I'm just going to copy this one, put a comma here, and then I can specify Mike 2, Winston 2, something like this, and test 2, for instance, here. And now I can select the statement, quite simple, and I can hit F5, and then SQL tells me, hey, you know what? 2 rows have been affected. You have 2 additional rows in your system. So if I now choose this one, I will see that I have essentially 2 records, which are Mike Winston, because I'm filtering it right here. So now this is something that I want to also test with my SQL statement. So obviously those records are highly likely they're duplicates. The reason why they're showing in different in 2 rows is that they're really different rows, and they have a different primary key. They have unique identifier. So essentially this is what differs those values. So you can quickly understand, do you have duplicates or not, by using one more statement, which is called distinct. So here you see we have 2 of them. And now what I want to see, I just want to say distinct. So it should return me just 1 row, because every column that I have been specified here, it's being returned. So if I just hit F5, I'm getting only 1 row, and another row is being ignored because it's duplicated. But the same expression will not work if I do something like this. Then I would still get 2 rows, because the ID column, my mouse is making me a bit of a trouble. Okay, let me just see. Okay, let me just do it with the keyboard. Okay, so F5, I'm getting 2 records here. So this is because the ID is different, and then the set is a bit different, so it's not a duplicate in this case. So it really depends on the items which is specified here. You can do different things. You can specify multiple columns where to sort. You can extend your where clausal quite significantly. You can also group data as well. And this is something that we're going to do a bit afterwards. I also want to do an update a bit. So how do you do the update? So it is very, very simple. So the update statements goes something like this: update, and then we specify table, and then in this case this is a user. Why am I always putting user in the brackets? Because if I specify the user, it will become a bit of a blue. And the reason because it's blue is there is a keyword user. So you have to put it inside the brackets, and then it's being recognized as the entity from your database. So if I want to update a certain things for the user, I can specify here which columns do I want to update. So let's say that I want to update this record. I want to call Winston, I'm going to say Lee, something like this. I can say last name, I will say set last name equals to Lee. And I will also set date of birth is going to be something, let me just copy this one. I'm going to say something like this. So I'm going to update actually 2 columns here. But what will happen if I execute only this? Actually, every single record in the user table will be updated, and his last name is going to be Lee, and the date of birth is going to be this one. So this is something that we really don't want to do. We need to be really careful with this. So what should do here, we should specify a condition for which columns this update applies. How do we do this? Well, we say just where, and then we specify our criteria. In this particular case, the column that uniquely identifies this row is the ID. It's a primary key as well. So we say where ID equals this. Now, how do you want to test this? So before executing this, especially in the production tables, it can be quite useful for you to test this. So you can test it just by saying select, let's say all from user, and then you can just copy this little fellow here. And let me just close this one. And then you can see what record are you actually working with. There are some other mechanisms, etc., but in this video, I'm just going to show this one. So you see that you're getting a correct Mike Winston. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to run the update. I execute this. SQL explains, okay, there is one row affected. And now I can actually see, is this correct? So it really updated my record with the ID 88 something. And the last name is now Lee, and date of birth is also being updated to something that I want. So update, really, really simple. Delete, also simple. So how do you work with a delete? Almost the same as the update. You specify here, delete user, and if you execute this, obviously you're going to delete every single row from the user table. So what we have to do again is we should specify the criteria. And I'm just going to copy this one because now I want to delete Mr. Mike Lee. And if I just select this and execute this, it tells me that one row has been affected and that my record doesn't exist anymore there. And this is completely fine. So I don't have actually any more Mike Lees, which are duplicates. So I have, in this case, only Mike Winston. And this is quite nice. So what else can I do here? So I can in a select statement use also, let's say, some powerful way to do a bit of a search. So in the case that I want to, for instance, search all the people. So let me just delete this criteria here, and I'm going to select all of them. Now, what I'm interested in is to find, let's say, all the persons which names start with M, something like this. Then how would I do this? I would say where last name, like we said M, and then I'm going to put like a percentage sign. So let me just see. And then I'm getting all of the persons which names start with M. If I want to say that I want to see all the records which last name has an A character somewhere in a string, I can do something like this, and then I'm getting all of those records. So this is quite a powerful way to do let's say a search, but be quite careful with a like expression, because like expression, like filter query is quite expensive, especially if we're talking about large data sets. Then like can really add significant time to the execution. Cool. So yeah, this is actually quite nice, I believe, way to get a bit of an introduction inside the system. And the only thing that I want to do at the end is to explain you also, the difference in the deletion of the referential tables. So now this might be a bit of a confusing, but let's go again to the diagram quickly. I'm just going to create a diagram once more, which we did the last time. So here, if you see, you will see that the user table is actually using the values from different tables. It's using the values from the account type, which is, for instance, specified here, and the language one, which is specified here. So now this user table, essentially, if we just look at the query here, as soon as my mouse stops getting crazy, you see here that the primary language has a certain value, O due to something. So This means that in a language table, there is actually a row with this primary key, and we can just quickly check it out. We can say select all from language. Oopsie, from language. So if we do this, actually let me just select those two queries because it's going to be nicer for me. So primary language here is OD2, and if I just hover this, I'm going to get an English. Now, what is going to happen if I want to delete English language? Let's try it out. So I'm just going to say delete language, and I'm going to say where ID equals to English. And I'm going to select this one, hit F5. Boom, I get the exception. What is actually error, not the exception. So what is the reason for this error? It actually tells us exactly that our delete statement is conflicted with the reference constraint between user and the language table. And this is how the constraint is being named. So we cannot actually delete the values from one table if they're used in another table. So we have to clean up first the parent table before we can actually delete the rows from the child table. However, if we go to some other language, for instance, let me just go with a Croatian one, which is probably not used anywhere for any of the users, I can just specify the Croatian language, here, the ID of the Croatian language, I can just select it, hit F5, and I'm going to get one row affected. So the Croatian language has successfully been deleted because it's not being used by the user or by language proficiency table, because the language is also being used in the language proficiency table. So in this case, you're pretty sure, you're actually 100% sure that your records are going to be always cleaned and that you will not be able to delete any of the child records before deleting the values from your parent table. Obviously, there are ways to do this as well. It's called cascade delete, but you know, this is some additional things that you can implement in your databases, but it is a bit more complicated topic than it is for now. So yeah, that's essentially it, everything what I wanted to show you today. So thank you very much for your time, and talk to you again. One more thing that I forgot is group by. So we can also group by just creating a new query, and I'm going to explain you how the group by works. So you can write select from, and in this case I'm going to say user, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to group the users by account type ID. And I'm going to also put here, let's say, first name and last name. Now I'm going to select those values, and here are all the values that I have. They're not actually grouped, they're not sorted or anything like this. So what I can do here is I can say from user group by account type ID, and then by first name, and then by last name. And then the records are being grouped. So now, why is this actually pretty cool? You can do quite good aggregations with the group by column. So for instance, if I do something like this, if I say something like this as total. So let me just explain you what is this. So first of all, this is the expression which is going to count all of the rows that fits this criteria. So it will count all of the rows for the specific account type, and they're going to be grouped obviously by those two values which exist in the system in this case. And here I'm specifying as, this is a keyword essentially to build an alias. So here I'm saying that this column is going to be as a total, so total number or something like this. You can also put it like this, and then if you're writing a space, then you can just put it like this to write it really as a string. So if I execute this one now, I will see that I have 9 rows with this account type and 4 rows with this account type. So this is essentially giving me the opportunity to really execute certain aggregations of the data for our data set. And I can also run here order by, let's say, by account type ID. So it will not really bring us any value, but we can also sort it out by this, for instance, and then like this, and then we're getting the biggest number first, and this is essentially how it works. Maybe just one thing, which is also something that I didn't mention. You always see that I'm writing those keywords with the uppercase, and this is because I really like this way, because it gives me a better readability of the system. I can also write it like this, and it will still work. It will be exactly the same, but just try to use the uppercase, because all the documentation and everything is going to use the uppercase scenario. So that's it. Thank you very much and have fun.